Alright, so in this video I hope to shed some insight, clarity, and simplicity on the deeply dominant and prevalent human constructs of religion and or spirituality. Now typically why people are interested in these things, when you really boil it down and look at what it is, it's generally these things are tools or perhaps paths to a person getting what they want. Whether that's some idea of I'm going to get saved from something bad, or I'm going to get something good, or I'm going to be a better person, or now in modern times I'm going to heal a disease, or I'm going to be a good person, or I'm going to save the world. I'm going to fill in the blank with the permutations of these basic concepts. But really, when you look at the actual functionality, the actual mechanics, what people are actually saying and meaning, it's usually coming down to this these things as being usually means to an end. And then another major thread within that is now in modern times there's all the alternatives, because when we talk about wanting something, which is probably true for pretty much all of us, we all kind of want something, or we have an idea or an aspiration, perhaps a better life or a better state of being, or being happier or more fulfilled or whatever. So we really tend to only feel that because there's something that we sense as being a bit off or a bit worthy of changing or transforming. And especially now in modern times, at least politically, a lot of people really want to change the world, politically, environmentally, the way things are really being run when things are happening. There's a huge emphasis in leaning towards obviously changing and transforming things. So this thread, this dynamic, this meme, this archetype is operating at a global or more of a collective scale, and also on the more micro scale for the individual. So if we want to take these big lofty concepts, which generally don't really mean that much and are really never defined, because that's also kind of what allows people to really like them, and that's what allows them to be potent. Because if you want something to be widely adopted and consumed, you have to make it really vague and kind of watered down and generic, because the more specific something gets and the more well defined, the smaller the target group then becomes. That's true for anything that's consumable, whether that's information or media or food or various types of foods or anything like that. Anything we are consuming, this principle is at play. So how do we simplify that? How do we really break it down? Well, we can basically look at a few questions. Number one, what is a human being? What is the world or our culture or our society or our religious or spiritual tradition really telling us what a person is? What are we thinking and believing that a person is? And more importantly, how are we actually living our lives? The things that, what are the choices we are making, how we are being informed by this conditioning, this belief. That's the first thing. Second thing is, what is the world? And then the third thing being, how do these two things relate? What is their relationship? Is it a hierarchy? Is it some evil, torturous place where we have to follow some path to some salvation or something? Or is it some Eden paradise? Or is it some computer hologram? I mean, these are all just various ideas which people are really into. So then I guess the third question we could, or I guess the fourth question we could ask is, really, is it safe? That's a kind of an important thing to put in that mix. And pretty much every single tradition in modern times is going to answer those questions functionally in pretty much the same way. They might just rearrange it ever so slightly. Meaning, let's say the basis, it's really much in the same way of, like, in America, if you want like food, in a lot of places you have like McDonald's, Burger King, okay? You might think, whoa, like freedom of choice. But it's like, no, so many choices have just been made for you, and you're operating at such a small micro level that there's really no difference. And ultimately, it's highly likely that the same companies are supplying both of those places. They're just rearranging it in a slightly different way. And depending on the marketing campaign they're running, it might appeal to certain sensibilities that you have versus other ones. So it's really not choice. It's really not freedom at all. Because maybe you realize, oh wait, these things are actually not food. These are actually meant to stimulate all of the surface sensory orifices that tell us it's food, but actually deplete us in the long term. So that's really the same principle that is at play for the majority of philosophical and psychological things that are available in the modern world, because as I said, the more widely available something is, the more widely consumed, you can assume less potency, less specificity, less definition, less efficacy, all of these types of things, because if those things were in place, then again, the target group would get really, really, really small. For example, I'm drinking tea that's from the 60s, and it was rather expensive. A few $100s for an ounce of tea, which is like about 30 grams for a few €100. Now, if I were to say, you know what, this tea is amazing, changed my life, I'm going to start a business. Yeah, might be able to do that, but the target demographic for someone who has developed all of the sensibilities and learning to get to the place to even understand the value of what the thing is and be able to taste it and discern it and experience it, that's very small. And then have the money, the disposable income to do it, the time to sit down and enjoy it. All of these things, wow, that's going to be really small. But let's say I just wanted to sweep some stuff up from the factory floor and put it in a tea bag and make it look nice. I could have a huge business that way, because there's way more people that just have no understanding and don't care. They're like, oh, tea's good for me, so I'll drink it. So that's just another example. So getting back to our point is looking at these three questions: is what is a human being? What is the world? And then how do these things relate? And then is that kind of a safe, harmonious relationship or not? And I've talked about each of these things in great details throughout a myriad of videos that I've done over the past couple of years, so I'm not really going to get into it now, because if you actually care, you can just watch those videos rather than me making this one like 48 minutes or 2 hours or whatever. And then the last thing I'll say is that you might also just be like, oh, well, why don't you just tell us? You're talking about how these things are, okay, for example, oh, what is a human being? Well, a lot of people say, oh, it's like a meat suit, this physical solid thing, but it somehow has like a soul attached to it, or like a spirit attached to it, or it's like we are this thing, but then we're not. We're like separate, we're different, we're higher or lower. And we have all these divided parts of ourselves that we have to manage and do all these things, but then there's like the higher part of ourselves, which is like higher, but it's also like there's a higher part above that, and then a higher being, but it's like all this complexity. Or, oh, we're just like a blind meat suit as a result of some creation event at the beginning of time, i.e. Big Bang, which mechanically and functionally speaking is identical to creationism. It's just changed around because for our sensibilities, it's like, oh, you want fast food, but you want to feel healthy about it, so you're just going to go to Wendy's and get like a chicken sandwich and like whatever. It's like, well, no, it's still probably fast food and laden with chemicals, but because you have the self-image to be like, oh, well, I'm a healthy modern person, so I need to. It's like, no, you're still buying garbage. You're still participating in the milieu of nonsense and watered down mainstream consciousness, but it just fits your bias, which you're in denial that you even have, so you feel good about yourself and superior to everyone else because that's what you've been conditioned to do, because it makes you profitable and easy to control and really docile. Because it's easier to like control people if they just can control themselves. So then if you have systems in place that psychologically make them do that in the same way in which you might potty or house train your dog, or Pavlovian type of things. We are treated in much the same way. We treat ourselves in the same way. Like, I was really good, I worked really hard, so I totally deserve this cookie right now. It's like, you're an adult. You can do whatever you want. If you want to have cookies all day, you can do that. You just have to be adult enough to realize there might be consequences. Or you can be adult enough to be smart enough and say, oh, well, maybe if I make it out of real ingredients and like actually make it more traditional, where there's like barely any sweetener in it, but it's like made from food, oh, then it might actually be food. So if you fucking love cookies, you can have all the cookies you want, and it's actually food. So it's not a big deal. But again, we're an adult, so we can do these things if we want to. Anyways, getting back to our point, so why do I not just say, okay, well, here's the alternative, here's what you should do? Well, because what's very likely to happen is people will be like, that's bullshit, that's stupid, because they're coming from the position of all the things that are basically just societally conditioned. So whatever I say is going to mean nothing. Much in the same way, I have this world-class, amazing tea, right? But if you've never had any of this stuff before, you have no idea what it is, you're going to be like, I don't really taste anything, or this tastes like dirt. This tastes like, nah, I don't like it. It's like, well, yeah, because you have no palate for it. You haven't laid the necessary foundations. You haven't gone through the necessary steps and stages and processes to get to the place to even be like, I can understand what that's actually about and why it actually exists. So that's the first reason. The second reason is that it's will just become another thing to believe in, right? Oh yeah, that makes way more sense. So that's like now that's my standardized view of the world. It's like, no. But what's more useful, empowering, liberating, enlightening, whatever you want to call it, is looking at these things for ourselves. Looking at our own experience, saying like, okay, first off, maybe I have no idea how I would even answer those questions. So let me reflect on how I might actually answer those questions, which all of these things take time. It's not an instant, got it type of thing. It's a dynamic process which unfolds over time and can lead us through different experiences, which can be useful. So that's actually building something, because if we're actually engaging and being more reflective, we are engaging and being reflective, so we're strengthening that muscle, which is only going to serve us for the rest of our life. So we're actually doing something, not just passively like, oh, that's right, fuck the government, I believe this now. What is that even doing? Like nothing. It's just, oh, I took one standardization and replaced it with another because it fits my bias. So it's basically looking at, okay, this is what I might really think or what I'm being told. Does my experience actually match that? Like, do these things line up? And if the immediate thing is like, oh yeah, totally, then should probably be a little bit suspicious. It's kind of like, if someone says something, and you're immediately just like, oh, yes, oh, it's so good, oh. Odds are it's probably not making you grow. You're probably just validating what you already think. You're probably just there's probably just nothing happening. Obviously there are exceptions. Sometimes we can all have like flashes of insight where we can hear something and it connects and puts things in a way that we haven't, maybe we were trying to put into words, but it clicks. That's a different experience. That's a different process. But really, if you look at most of the things, whether it's programs people are paying money to go to, or retreats, or trainings, or all types of different institutions, the majority of it oftentimes is just validation. People are talking, or like lecturers and authors and these types of things. People make entire careers about saying the same thing forever. which is fine, I guess. Like, if you're content, if you're a musician and you write one song, you're content to play that one song for 40 years, cool. Seems a bit crazy, but that's kind of what people do. And they just say the same thing, but people just want to hear it again and again and be validated, not actually engage and keep moving past. In the same way, something I was thinking about the other day is like I can remember when I was 14, and if you're adolescent male, you know, hormonally just raging and going through puberty, and you play a lot of sports, you're surrounded by a lot of dudes, you could easily fall into like dick measuring contests, you know, this like grandiose kind of mentality, right? Where it's obviously adolescent, and but it makes sense because you are actually adolescent. So for you to like do the dick measuring and the competition and want to be better than everyone else and all of these types of things and have all kinds of extreme behaviors kind of makes sense because that's where you are in your life and your system is supporting that. The thing is that a lot of males never actually go out of that stage. And if you look at, I don't know, the state of the world, a lot of times it's not really past that stage. But what happens is you're still operating at a adolescent level, but your body is no longer an adolescent. So there becomes what we might call a schism, as in schizoid, as in schizophrenic, as in psychotic, as in psychosis, as in so that could happen. But then also the health of the body could potentially begin to be undermined as well. Hence, mass predominance of erectile drugs and why people love stimulants and love their coffee and high-paced lifestyles and all these types of things, because they got stuck operating at like 10,000 volts and they just think they have to sustain that all the time. But it's like, yeah, but your body is not there anymore. So maybe chill the fuck out a little bit, grow up a little bit. But anyways, that's a bit of a tangent, but it illustrates kind of some of the points that we're talking about. So really, it's actually better for, I don't want to say better, but maybe perhaps more useful if we can actually engage in these things in our own life. Because then if we can activate these processes, we're not really reliant so much on things. We don't necessarily need a standardized fixed view because we're actually alive and we are reflecting on our experience and our narrative about our experience, and we're seeing how it fits or how it doesn't fit, how it's functional and how it's not. And perhaps that's I don't know, more human. Like, it seems like more of a dynamic process, which if we are alive, then it makes sense to be alive and do things which are, living processes instead of just blindly following and believing things and kind of just being asleep at the wheel a bit, because actually questions are a bit more useful than answers, because questions can kind of move us through things, whereas if someone just tells you an answer, depending on the kind of person you are, some people that can work, but a lot of people it can't. Be a bit lazy. And just be like, oh, okay, I'll just believe that now. Okay. So wait, I used to think I was just like this mechanical, physical being, but now I realize I'm just like a spiritual being. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Okay, that's what I believe now. And it's like, it's not really any different. You just took a really small, limited, superstitious, really unfounded way of looking at the world, and you just rearranged it slightly because it feels more hip, or it's more hormonally stimulating. It supports mania and like manic behavior and psychosis and passive aggression and poor boundaries, and it supports a whole host of ways in which that we can avoid actually engaging in our life experience, being accountable, responsible, and even showing up in our fucking lives to a degree. So obviously it's the next best thing, because while we were just at the blind whim of God and or nature and evolution, But now we're just at the blind whim of like our spirit guides and like astrology and like, I don't know, our chakra balance and our karma and all these other things. It's like, well, no, it's just it's nothing different. Which, if it's what we're into, and our experience really is supporting that, and it's really working for us, then we're adults. Do it up. But if we should maybe even check in and see if that's like actually happening or actually a thing, or if we're just sort of like. Anywho, hopefully this video has been helpful, giving you some questions and things to consider. I'm gonna go have more tea and talk to you soon.